Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into this really powerful, deceptive figure who shows up in the end times prophecies of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. We're talking about a story of a great trial, incredible faith, and a final epic showdown. Okay, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the shared idea of this great enemy. Then, we'll get into the specific details in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And finally, we'll put them all side by side to really understand the bigger message here. So, at the core of what we're talking about today is this belief that the Abrahamic faiths all share. Each one is waiting for a powerful, incredibly deceptive figure who's going to show up at the end of the world and test humanity like never before. And that really gets us to the big question, right? Even though he has different names and the details vary, what's the central idea behind this enemy? What does this figure actually represent across all these different beliefs? All right, let's jump into our first perspective and see how this figure is understood in the Islamic tradition. Over there, he's known as Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, which basically means the deceiving Messiah. So in Islam, the Dajjal isn't some minor player in the story. No way. He is a major sign that the final hour is getting close. His whole purpose is to mislead humanity in what is said to be the greatest test the world will ever see. And get this, the Islamic texts are super specific about what he's like. He's described as blind in his right eye, and he has the word for disbeliever literally written on his forehead. He'll have these incredible powers, performing illusions that seem like real miracles, making it rain, making deserts bloom, even making it look like he can bring people back from the dead. And he does all this to back up his claim that he is God. Now, this is where it gets really strange, the whole concept of time during his reign. His big test will only last for 40 days, but time itself is going to get all distorted. The first day will feel like an entire year, the second will feel like a month, and the third like a week. After that, the last 37 days will feel like normal days. But, his rule isn't meant to last forever. According to Islamic tradition, Jesus, or Isa, son of Mary, is going to return to Earth, hunt down the Dajjal, and finally defeat him at a place called the Gate of Lod. Okay, so let's switch gears and look at the Christian perspective, where this figure is probably most famously known as the Antichrist. This is interesting. The New Testament actually talks about the Antichrist in a couple of different ways. First, there's the spirit of Antichrist, which refers to anyone who denies the truth. But then there's the prophecy of the Antichrist, a single ultimate deceiver who will rise up at the very end. He's also called the Beast in the book of Revelation. So picture this. He's not just some religious trickster. He's this charismatic, powerful global leader. He's going to unite the entire world under one political and religious system, using fake signs and wonders to get people on his side. And his ultimate goal? To have all of humanity worship him as if he were God. And of course, you can't talk about the Antichrist without bringing up probably the most famous symbol from the book of Revelation, the number 666. It's described as the number of the beast, a kind of mark that's tied to his system of total global control. And just like we saw with the Dajjal, the Antichrist's time and power has a definite expiration date. Christian scripture says he'll be completely destroyed by Christ himself when he returns at the second coming. All right, now let's turn to the Jewish tradition. In this case, the idea of a single end times bad guy is a little less clear-cut, but the concept of a final hostile enemy is definitely there. Now, what's different here is that unlike the super specific figures in Islam and Christianity, Jewish texts tend to focus more on hostile forces, like entire armies or nations that will rise up against the people of Israel in one last, huge conflict before the Messianic age begins. But there are a few figures that kind of represent this final enemy. For instance, post-biblical writings talk about a villain named Armilus, who will actually fight the Messiah. And even more well-known is the prophecy of Gog and Magog, which describes this massive group of nations that will launch a final war before they're defeated by God himself. Okay, so we've looked at all three perspectives. Let's pull it all together now and see how these incredible stories compare and what they're really trying to tell us. So when you put it all side by side like this, you can really see the incredible similarities, but also the really key differences. All three see a great deceiver who challenges God's authority, but Islam gives us these precise physical details. Christianity talks about a symbolic global system, and Judaism pictures the enemy more as a hostile nation. And look at how they're all defeated. Every single one ends with the ultimate triumph of good. So at the end of the day, when you look past all the dramatic prophecies, this figure has a really deep purpose in all three religions. It represents that final, ultimate clash between good and evil. It's a warning not to be fooled by appearances or power, and it's a powerful reminder that no matter how big the test, divine justice is going to win in the end. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. In a world that's filled with its own kinds of deception, what's the lesson we can take away from these ancient warnings? How can they maybe help us tell what's true from what's false and hold on to what we believe in, especially when things get tough?